And without further ado, I want to bring in our guests. He is a senior reporter covering the 2020. He's senior election for Politico, specializing in video. He's a huge Beyonce fan, which we will need to get through this. And he's been doing some great coverage over at Politico. Please welcome Eugene Daniels.
Hey, thank you for that intro, senior. I'm going to tell my bosses to give me some more money for that one.
Yeah, right? Francesca said I'm senior. Thank you so much for being here, Eugene. And also joining him is Nathalie Molina Niño, a senior advisor for Movement Voter Project, which is a group that supports community-based organizations in key states focusing on youth and communities of color. She's right now in Atlanta, Georgia, and Movement Voter Project has been on the ground and monitoring voting in disenfranchised areas. Welcome, Nathalie.
Thank you. I am happy to be here, and especially happy to be in Atlanta.
Yes, absolutely. There is a lot, man. Georgia is a huge story of the day. I want to just start off sort of more broadly and specifically about what I think everyone is wondering, Eugene. Is there a path to victory for Donald Trump? And is there a path to victory for Joe Biden? How is it looking? Please don't lie to me.
Yeah, I promise I won't. There's a path for both of these men. The path for President Trump is still kind of what we had at the beginning of the last night. It's still a slim, narrow path, right? And what's happening right now in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the president and his team are looking, one, he is saying things like he wants to stop the vote count, which is not how this works, that it shouldn't all be counted. Again, not how democracy works, things that are very concerning. Joe Biden's path, especially him looking like he's going to hold on to Arizona, that is really good for him, right? That gives him some wiggle room when it comes to those states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. It looks like CNN has just called Wisconsin for Joe Biden. The AP has not. But that is something that we're probably expecting. I've been talking to Michigan Democrats today, and they're feeling super confident there as well, right? What we're seeing, I think, larger is that this was not the repudiation of Donald Trump that Joe Biden was expecting, that Democrats were expecting, and frankly, some moderate Republicans were expecting, right? We saw a lot of that throughout the campaign. This was not a repudiation of the president's racist rhetoric, his hardline immigration plans. Those things are not an interlude in the Republican Party, and they're deeper in the Republican Party and this country, I think, than Democrats had hoped.
Great. Thank you. Of course, it's CNN who calls a state first. They love to do that. CNN is like the dude in the comments who's like first. That's what they do. But so with this Wisconsin win, just briefly, does that mean it's a wrap? Can we semi-celebrate?
Semi, you know what I mean? I think everyone should just chill out a little bit, because we're going to see some lawsuits, definitely from President Trump. They've already filed one. And that's going to happen. They're sending Rudy Giuliani to Pennsylvania. Yeah. He said he's on his way. So all of these things are going to continue to happen for this week and probably moving forward. So it's kind of buckle in time, but it looks like Joe Biden's going to do better than we were expecting at the end of last night.
Absolutely. It made for a very tough night's sleep. Nathalie, how has it been for you in Georgia and getting out the vote? And what have you seen on the ground in terms of this lack of an overwhelming mandate and an overwhelming landslide for Joe Biden?
I mean, it is in terms of maybe the hope and the wishes that we all had that it would be a landslide. But when you think about the subset of the population that is Native American, the subset of the population that ultimately, especially women of color represents in this country, and you think of the fact that we are achieving, no matter if they're slim wins, the movement has been largely fueled by grassroots organizations who, for example, started pivoting to digital work and knocking on doors, but doing it virtually, right, over the phone, doing it all because of the pandemic long before any of the campaigns, including the Biden campaign, pivoted, right? So who were the first ones to pivot to digital? It was these grassroots organizations led by Black, Indigenous, people of color led organizations. And so I don't know. I guess part of what I'm thinking is that, yeah, we all wanted this landslide, but on the other hand, if it wasn't for the grassroots organizations and the people of color on the ground, we wouldn't have slim wins at all, right? And it's kind of tremendous to think that this small group of people have moved mountains and created something that 4 years ago we would never have seen possible. And so, with Movement Voter Project, that's been the biggest takeaway for me, is that I was a surrogate for Warren, and when she dropped out of the race, I just wasn't feeling the idea of putting a lot of my time, energy, or even money into more campaigns. And so when I went looking, I looked for an organization that was basically just opting out of participating in campaigns and saying, who's moving the needle? Who's actually going to be more likely, like they did in Arizona, to actually get these low propensity voters out, right? Arizona wouldn't be possible if a bunch of, misfit Latinos weren't out on the streets getting over 1 million new people registered. And so, it's not a landslide, but I still think it's pretty amazing what we're achieving.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one question is that I've had, which is, should there have been more in-person events, right? And given that we're in a pandemic and that we know that Trump events have spread coronavirus, like a preschool spreads a common cold, like it is, we know like that it's incredibly dangerous, but at the same time, it seems like the Biden campaign was incredibly late to doing a safe amount of door knocking, a safe amount of getting out the vote. In terms of like, we had record numbers of early voters, record numbers of youth voters, right? This is not going to be that election where your parents can call you up and be like, why didn't millennials vote more, right? Record number of Asian American and Latino voters. And just if you want to comment, because there's a lot of talk right now, Nathalie, around the Latino vote and why Trump actually made a lot of headway, specifically in Florida. What is wrong with how we're talking about the Latino vote right now? And can you clarify?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing wrong with it is it's not anything that Latinos don't already know. Apparently, it's just that the rest of the world is waking up the fact that you can't take, a territory as large as a continent plus that is also, got every possible race and ethnicity included, as well as religions, right? 1 out of every, 4 or 5 Latinos identify as Black. The immigrant experience of, say, a Cuban coming to a place like Florida, right, at the time that many of them came to Florida is very different than the immigrant experience of the people, that come because of a failed democracy, largely instigated by, powers like the United States going into countries like where my family is from, Ecuador, Colombia. Our experiences coming to the United States, working in my case, like my family did in the sweatshops of Los Angeles, are very different, than the people who got immediate, citizenship coming from Cuba, and were embraced by a nation that loves people that are white passing, right? And so these are immigrant experiences that are absolutely different. And the fact that the US ever, or that any political party, left or right, ever thought of, the Latinx community as one monolith, it's a mistake. And I don't know that it's anything new that we're learning. I think that what we're learning is that people need to, study grade school geography.
Yeah. Eugene, make sense of the fact that Trump has more voters now than he did in 2016. Please. I want to play what he said in a little bit, but just how do you wrap your head around that? And, you've been studying this election for a while, and pollsters got it wrong yet again.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, when it comes to the polling community, right, they are missing something, right? There's something about what's happening in this country that we're missing in the polls. What they do moving forward, how we trust them moving forward, that's President Trump already doesn't trust polling. Republicans are starting to trust it writ large a lot less. That's concerning for future elections.
Yeah.
When it comes to, President Trump getting more votes, this was a high impact election. I think we'll see this as things start becoming more clear, is that as it became obvious that Democrats were coming out in huge numbers in the early vote, that did actually make Republicans a little more excited to go vote. They were saying the whole time that they were going to vote in person, but I think President Trump kind of like lying and saying that this, in-person voting, mail-in voting was fraudulent and would create a fraudulent election, that made Republicans kind of want to go out and vote for him. Some of the,
I think we may have lost you a little bit, Eugene. Did you? Oh, okay. Eugene froze. There you are. You're back.
The thing that Democrats are having a huge problem with is, you talked about it earlier. We were expecting this to be a COVID election, right? Like whether or not you thought President Trump did a good job or has done a good job at handling or mishandling this pandemic. That doesn't seem like to be the case, right? That is, it seems like we are so divided and so polarized in this country that something as big as 230,000 humans dying here because of the mishandling of a pandemic from an administration is not enough to make people run away from him. So that's how the country deals with that in the future is going to be interesting, I guess. Is probably the best way to put it. Concerning, huge, and because everybody has a lot of work to do, and how Democrats, like Natalie was saying, choose the people that they want to vote for them and how they message that to each person and each group, even within a group, is going to be really key for their winning in other elections moving forward.
Yeah.
I would just add that, I'm kind of not surprised that the people who don't believe in the pandemic at all had no problem coming out and physically putting themselves in danger. And the people who believe in science and the people who understand how pandemics work, and not to mention the Black and brown people who are more likely to die from the pandemic, they were a little more reticent to come out, and the numbers aren't quite what, some of us had hoped. Not suggesting that that's the only reason, but objectively, when I think of, those two perspectives on life and science, it's kind of not shocking to me.
Yes, life and science. That's how we will secede from the nation. There'll be the life and science portion of the country, or one country, and the other countries, just as we talked before in News Broke, just greater Idaho is really what it'll be. Just a very large Idaho. And I'm not convinced we don't need that right now. I'm going to play for you both and want to get your reactions to the clip that I think we all avoid watching, which was last night, Donald Trump clearly declaring fraud and victory at the same time. Take a listen.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. Okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment. And we will win this. And as far as I'm concerned, we already have one.
There you heard it there. We don't want the voting to continue. We want it to stop, even though it was postmarked on November 12th. Also, there are about 300,000 ballots, I believe, that have been caught up in the USPS. As we all knew, they would be because of who is at the head of the USPS, Louis DeJoy. But Eugene, your reaction, you alluded to this earlier. Giuliani's being deployed to Pennsylvania. Could this end up at the Supreme Court based on the amount of legal challenges?
It could. There are so many problems with what President Trump said last night. One of the biggest problems is that he's promising that he's going to take it to the Supreme Court. The president can't just walk over to the Supreme Court and tell them to take a case, right? Like, that's not how it works. That's not how our country works. There are going to be lawsuits. Could they get to the Supreme Court? Yes. However, I think something that, we saw the Supreme Court over the last couple of weeks when they were deciding, in different states whether or not ballots can come, and they were focusing on not getting into the mess. And something I know Democrats are bristling right now because President Trump has 3 people on the Supreme Court that he put there. But I do think that Chief Justice Roberts is concerned about the validity of the court. He knows that it's taken a hit over the last few years. So I don't see the Supreme Court just doing whatever President Trump says, even if it makes it to the Supreme Court. The president wants it both ways, right? He wants votes to continue to be counted in Arizona, where he's a little closer. Exactly. But none of the secretaries of state that have spoken today in these states that are still counting have said anything about voting irregularities. This is something completely made up by the president and people that work for him. And so how Republicans react, not how Democrats on the left react, how the Republicans react, elected Republicans moving forward in the next few days and next weeks possibly, and telling President Trump, like, yo, chill. Like, that is not how this works. This is a democracy. We count the votes, and that is not a partisan statement, Mr. President. That's going to be key to how this shakes out and how he reacts and how his voters react and supporters react to whatever the outcome is.
So we're relying on Republicans?
Yeah, I think so. I know that's probably scary for people watching, but a little bit, right? Like there is, you know, if Republicans just allow President Trump to continue on, you know, this bandwagon, keep banging this drum, and then support him in that, right? If he has, you know, judges in these different states, and then, you know, on the federal level that just do what he says, that is going to be hugely problematic. I think when you talk to Democrats behind the scenes right now, they are hoping that Republicans will, because you've been hearing it over and over, right? We are going to continue to count these ballots. The Secretary of State of Georgia, a Republican, has already said there's no fraud here, right? He said that today. So those are things that, you know, I think maybe might help people sleep a little better at tonight, maybe tomorrow.
Yes. Nathalie, I want to leave you with the last word for right now. Well, maybe not, because I have so many questions, but I am very curious since you're in Georgia. You got two Senate races. These are key races, and one is too close to call. The other between Kelly Loeffler and Reverend Warnock, that's going to a runoff in January. Tell me about those and from the ground and what you've seen.
I mean, obviously, we're all moving to Georgia this month, right? So that's the first thing. Look, I think at the end of the day, not just Trump, but right all the way down the line, when they know that they can't win, and the closer it gets to being narrower and narrower, we're going to see a lot of desperation. And then in Georgia, I think that, you know, this is, again, what I said earlier in terms of the work. I mean, people like Black Voters Matters are headquartered in Georgia, right? They didn't just do work nationally. They did work home, right? And places, you know, partners like this for Movement Voter Project are the ones that have been kind of doing this work, and they're not going away. And what I love about a lot of our grassroots partners, people like the organizations here in Georgia, is that they didn't just raise capital and deploy people who actually know their neighbors and got the vote out, but they also raise money for litigation. And that's kind of maybe, if I'm going to add to Eugene's effort to help people sleep, these same organizations that have been busting their bottoms to get, you know, people out and in the streets have also raised money for lawyers. They knew that cheaters cheat. They knew that bullies try to bully. All of what we're seeing here is predictable, and it was budgeted, and we have lawyers, and we will fight.
That's good to hear. Nathalie Molina Niño, thank you so much, from Movement Voter Project. Please check out their work, and if you want to support or get involved, do that. Eugene Daniels of Politico, I'm naming him a senior reporter. That's what he is.
Yes.
Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Us. Thank you both.
Take good care. And we have Jamal Bowman waiting in the wings. He just won his seat in New York, and he's going to Washington, and I'm very, very excited. Thank you all for being here. Please remember to share this stream, like this stream, let people know that we're live.